I'm going to call this meeting to order. Good morning and welcome to the June 8th meeting of the Douglas County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. My name is Pam Weechen and I'm the chair of the CJCC. I wanted to pass a little bit of information regarding how we'll conduct our meeting on Zoom. I ask that all members present please turn on video if you have it. We ask that all members and presenters use good conference etiquette and call and mute your line when not speaking. We ask that you please identify yourself each time you speak. If you have public comment to make during the public comment section of the agenda, please raise your hand in the Zoom function. Recording of the CJCC meetings are available on the CJCC website after each meeting. A little housekeeping before we get started on the agenda. As we all know, it's hard to facilitate discussion on Zoom, and we want to see how the group feels about using the raise your hand function to help us ensure everyone's voice is heard. Is everyone good with that? You want to? Great, thank you. Mike and I will try and keep track of who's raised hands and also watch the time to help keep us on track. Our first agenda item today is an update from the Mobile Response Work Group. Stacey Cooper is here to update us on the work of that group.
Thank you. Good morning, all. So I want to give you just a recap of the latest happenings as it relates to this Mobile Response Work Group. We've continued to meet, and on May 5th, the County Commission work study session occurred and reviewed KSPHQ's crisis line proposal. On May 7th, the work group gathered and we formally reviewed the Burt Nash Mobile Access Response proposal as well. On June 16th, which would be next Wednesday, we're going to gather for another work study session that's going to specifically focus on the mobile access response proposal. And of course, that's a public meeting and all of you can attend that to get the details. I imagine that we will have future meetings likely in July to discuss our progress and the next steps as it relates to both of these proposals that we've been launching and reviewing and working towards. Of course, the County Commission work study regarding the KSPHQ proposal can be accessed online if you want to get the details there. Really just my goal here today is just kind of give you the recap. We're going to continue to work as a work group to address and support the initiatives that we've been launching. Outside of that, that's all I have. Happy to answer questions if you have them. Otherwise, I'm done.
Thank you, Stacey.
I don't think I need to summarize next steps. Yeah. If I do have that on the agenda, I want to always make sure I'm getting clarification from the CJCC on the direction you may want to head with this work group. If no one has any questions or suggestions here, we'll continue to move on. But just looking for your feedback, because the work group will drive its direction based on what you would like to, what you see as the priorities for our community. So.
Great, thanks, Mike. Our next agenda item is regarding CityGate, the CityGate report summary, and that's with Brandon McGuire and City Manager Craig Owens. What's up, Brandon?
Hi, this is Brandon. Yeah, I think Craig is planning on joining, but maybe running a little bit late. We were also hoping that interim chief Heffley could join us, but he's had something come up that he requires his attention. So you are stuck with me for today. So I will, Mike asked, he reached out last week and asked if we could provide a kind of a summary of the CityGate report. CityGate Associates was engaged as a independent consultant to conduct a top to bottom review of the Lawrence Police Department. And this actually, for those of you who may not know, or maybe just for the record, this was a study that we came up with the idea for last summer, and we engaged CityGate through a procurement process that some of you were involved with, and we appreciate your help with that, as well as some of our other community members, to identify CityGate as the finalist to take on this project for us. So it was a competitive national search for a consultant. We had some really good firms participate in that process, but it resulted in CityGate Associates out of California being hired to conduct the study. They bring experience in public safety, not just law enforcement, but public safety more broadly, as well as social work and community organizing. They bring that, or they brought that experience to this project. They also have some law enforcement members of their project team from the Midwest, both in the Minneapolis area as well as Kansas and Manhattan, Riley County. And so we had I think, a good blending of kind of professional experiences and um, regional distribution around the country on this project team from the consultant. And I think it really helped to bring a diversity of different technical lenses that they use to conduct this study and review our police organization. A major component of the study was stakeholder engagement and public engagement. And we really tried our best to do as much of that and a high quality engagement process, all Zoom based, and working with consultants who were living 2 time zones away and working entirely on Zoom throughout the whole project. And so it was quite a challenge, but the community really showed up when invited and when asked, and provided some great input, including many, if not all of you who also provided input to the consultant. And so we think that the final findings and recommendations, the final report, really does have our community's fingerprints on it. And we hope that the community finds it to be very responsive and reflective of the current conditions and future goals and aspirations for our police department. So before I jump into my PowerPoint review, are there any questions just kind of about the background of the study? Okay, seeing no virtual hands raised, I'm going to jump right in. Okay, so hopefully you can see the PowerPoint. And if this PowerPoint seems a little disjointed, I apologize. I am working off the consultant's slide deck, which is well in excess of 50 slides. And I know that this group does not have time to go through all of that. It would take us several hours of discussion in order to do that. So what I'm going to try to do is bounce around through the consultant slide deck and hit the summary slides. They really did, when we say top to bottom, this was a very in-depth study. There is a lot to read through in the full report, a lot to process, and a lot of it is internally focused on our police organization. And so I really want to highlight some of those points, but go through them fairly quickly, and then really talk about what I think this group may be interested in more, which has to do with community engagement, community partnerships, and some of our more aspirational goals around capacity development. So a few slides pretty quickly about the project purpose, and this just kind of expands on my preliminary comments. But we hired CityGate to conduct the in-depth study, understand department needs to transform with changing operational community needs. And so this is really a reflection of the environment of policing and law enforcement that we're working in today. A major component was understanding current conditions, operational needs, policy needs, and matching those with our community's expectations. And that's a key theme that you'll see throughout the study, is trying to bridge that gap between where we're at and where our community thinks we're at and where we want to be, and bringing all of those factors into good alignment. Also, being a data-driven, continuously learning organization, really with a model for constant improvement, as well as the management of change, is another key theme. Something that we really are excited to work with our police department on. They're excited to undertake is improving our data competency, um, both for developing our policies, as well as just becoming a more reflective police department that understands what the issues are that we really need to be focusing on, and develops data-driven solutions to those that reflect our community's values. So this slide summarizes kind of the environment of policing, and I think it's important, and I think most people on this meeting probably understand this, but believe it or not, policing, law enforcement is not the most highly regulated environment. There's not a standard manual for it. We use a cloud-based policy software, and we have 475 pages of policies, and that's our internal policy manual. And then you have to look at local laws, state laws, and the other, just the environment of laws that our police are either required or called on to enforce. Police, often find themselves in situations where there's really no playbook, and so it's just important to acknowledge that. And it's also important to acknowledge that this last point, a lot of what the community is expecting and wanting and desires for the Lawrence Police Department to do, or to change the way that they do what they do, is not directly under the city's purview. And so it's important for us to work with our state, county, health industry, and nonprofit partners to accomplish a lot of the goals that are identified in the study. So the assessment, this slide just summarizes the assessment methods that the consultants undertook. A lot of kind of surveying, engagement, listening sessions, a lot of data analysis, policy analysis, and just kind of your typical deep dive approach. The overview, the report includes 60 findings and 75 action item recommendations. I do want to note that the number of findings and the number of recommendations is not a reflection of a bad police department or a broken police department. The consultant really emphasized that it's a good police department, it's a traditional police department, and that this report provides us with a framework of recommendations to really take the next step, become a 21st century community-based police organization, and achieve develop a model for continuous improvement. So they use the terminology best practices tune-up. So so this slide I wanted to use to point out that there are some key findings about community engagement that we, as a police organization, our department understands community-centric policing. They get it, but they have a hard time translating that understanding. There have been barriers in translating that understanding to actually operating in that capacity, in that way. And so there are several recommendations, several findings and recommendations related to how do we flip that switch? How do we make that change from theory to practice? Again, it's a traditional police department, really good bones. In this report, these recommendations will provide us with a good framework to meet the community's expectations for being a community-based police organization. A key component of that is identified in this last bullet point, with supervision, quality control, oversight, and tracking of complaints. We've already taken steps within our police organization to increase and improve supervision, training, and oversight. We are also working on a new process and supported by new software for complaint tracking. But these have been gaps. One of the findings the consultant made was that the department has identified these as gaps and are already taking steps to improve upon them. There's some recommendations in the report that will help us get there even in a better way. So this slide talks a little bit about performance measures. We're not the most advanced department or organization in terms of data competency. Data is treated more like the counting of items. And so we've got a theme in this report related to our data, our use of data, the segmented systems in which law enforcement and criminal justice data are collected and managed, something that I think this group has identified as well. Additionally, in addition to the data findings, there's some findings about our actual performance metrics. No goals or a lack of goals for response time, caseload, case clearance, and other metrics. No or a lack of reported measures as part of the city's budget documents, and limited ties to the city's strategic plan. These are some things that we have identified as well, and we are working on ways to improve that. But again, the report's findings and recommendations help us do that in a more focused way. Just generally, there are some points of disconnection or potentially friction within the department or within the city government organization that we need to do work on. Let's see, just kind of scanning through this. Going to the next slide. So we really need to work on tying or developing the department's strategic plan, which these 75 recommendations provide the framework for that strategic planning process. Develop that plan and make sure that it is tied very directly to our city strategic plan, which really does have some key themes and KPIs, some outcome goals, KPIs and commitments that should help provide our strategic framework for this department strategic plan. We do have some other findings related to operations. Response times to high priority incidents are very good. We have short response time, short travel times. We have some concerns about dispatch processing times. And I know that there is work going on between law enforcement, fire medical, and county emergency communications to do work on that. That's been ongoing work. Current patrol staffing plans. The findings from the consultant was, the finding from the consultant was that it's not yet saturated to the level that proactive time is not available. One of the findings is that we need to get better in the management and use of our data about workload measures with our patrol staffing. And the consultant actually did an analysis that was more kind of just theoretical than anything, but their analysis showed that based on the data that we have, we could get by on most shifts with 4 police officers. And so I don't think that that's so much, I mean, that's clearly not a recommendation that we go to a minimum staffing level of 4 police units. Rather, it is showing that we have a great opportunity to improve the use of data and how we evaluate the workload measures and the staffing measures for our police organization. Some additional thoughts from the consultant: outside training must satisfy not only the department but community expectations, and we really need to, as a police organization, we need to shift and make sure that our policy manual, our training, is understood by the community and has community buy-in to it. A key theme on public engagement there. We do have a pretty striking finding with our tenure. The tenure of our officers, especially on the patrol unit, is very short. We have a very young police organization, and like many organizations around the country, we're challenged to recruit, we're challenged to retain. It is not an easy job, and it's not an easy time to be in the job. And so, part of the work that Craig and I are committed to is working with the department to make it a career path that people really are interested and excited about. And I think that having a strategic plan like that, which will come out of the framework of these recommendations, will be very helpful in doing that. Understanding that our officers are providing services that the community wants, values, and has their own fingerprints on, I think is going to be really important to that element. The best training only works when our people are held accountable and we have good systems for accountability and measurement. And that's another theme the consultant emphasized over and over, which is what gets measured gets done. And so we need to develop those systems, and that's really what we do as development of a management system. We need to develop those systems for goal setting and for measurement. So just a couple comments about the findings related to our partners, and as well as the internal partners within the city government. Alternative response strategies require fiscal and operational partnerships with county agencies, healthcare providers, and nonprofits. The consultant met with again, many folks on this call, as well as other providers, other thought leaders and organizers working on many of these community level partnerships. And just some general comments that they provided to me is that we have really good partnerships in place. Those partnerships could use some tune-up in terms of governance, MOUs or agreements, and good funding strategies. One of the findings that they reiterated to me several times throughout the study process is that our appetite, our aspirations outweigh our resources as a community. And so we really need to, if we're going to develop those street level partnerships where we have the flight control, and we have a great crisis intervention response plan 24/7, 365. That's a lot of capacity development that's ahead of us before we actually are able to deliver services in that way. It's not as simple as just flipping a switch and saying, okay, this unit on patrol is now going to be our crisis intervention team. They're going to be the ones who respond. Obviously we need systems in place. We need resources in place to make that happen. We need policies in place to make that happen. And so that was one of their key takeaways. 4 core challenges that the consultants found throughout the study process. Number 1 is community engagement. Our police department, I think they understand what it is to be a community-based police organization, but there's a gap in the understanding and in the practice. And so we are committed to developing systems of community engagement, not just doing kind of the survey check back to see, do you like us or not, but actually opening the doors, opening the windows, and bringing people in, letting them see how the work is done, how the policies and decisions are made, and really developing an understanding which will not only benefit the community, but benefit our police organization, and provide value to additional value to the way that they do the work that they do. Second core challenge, officer conduct and the Community Police Review Board. And so this is, in terms of officer conduct, that's a reference to our complaint process. And when community members have a concern or a complaint about a police officer or an experience that they've had with law enforcement, there's a challenge to them. There's a lack of understanding of what the process is to file the complaint, what the internal process is to review those complaints, and what system of accountability there is available to them to ensure that those processes happen, and that they have an ability to understand what the outcome of any sort of internal investigation is, and appeal that investigation if they feel the need to do so. And so that's something that I know our police department is committed to doing and improving. They've already made investments for how we track those complaints, and are actually working on dashboard functionality to be able to, as we populate that new database, to be able to report out the frequency of complaints, number of complaints, nature of complaints, some aggregated sort of metrics in order to improve transparency and trust in that process. There was a lot of discussion in the consultant report about the Community Police Review Board, and I know that they've been working on an ordinance, and there's some recommendations for how the board can engage others in developing their authorizing ordinance, and ultimately bring a recommendation for expansion of their role, their authority, their purview to the City Commission. Third core finding, alternative response systems. And there we're talking about many of the community partnerships represented on this call. We're talking about capacity enhancement, and new ways of being successful and being excellent at responding to calls for service related that are oftentimes the result of somebody who's in crisis, be it mental health, behavioral health, addiction, or any other number of sort of crisis situations where police have become the default first responders. I personally kind of use the terminology, maybe instead of first responder, zero responder, or preliminary responder, somebody who can go out and do some troubleshooting, do some triage, and then make sure that if law enforcement is needed, that is done in a skillful way, in a trauma-informed way, in a way that's going to help somebody very quickly, rapidly get stabilized and get the treatment that they needed, rather than arrest and incarceration. And I know that our police department is committed to doing that, but it requires everybody on this call, and then some probably. It's a community system that's going to get us there. It's not just the police department. And then finally, training and succession planning. Again, training needs to be, our policies and our training curriculum needs to be reflective of our community wants, needs, expectations. And we do have a good training division. We do most of our training in-house. We do our academy in-house. We have the opportunities to make that happen. And there are some recommendations for focusing of that unit and community engagement that I think will help us take that aspect to the next level. And then with that, the extension of that is succession planning. We need to develop tenure in our police organization. We need experience. We need to be able to retain our people so that they can get the repetitions they need. They can get the level of professional experience they need to really be successful. And then we need to have the avenues to put those folks who really are excelling into leadership positions. supervision in the field, supervision at a high level with dispatch, understanding what calls should, or what sort of response is appropriate to which sort of calls. That's going to be a key for us to be able to provide the type of police services and law enforcement services that the community expects. And so that is really kind of the summary of the report. There are about 50 additional slides of some pretty detailed recommendations. But what I wanted to do is just kind of talk about some of the closing comments and next steps, and then maybe open it up for any Q&A from the panelists or from the CJCC. So the closing departments again, or the closing comments again, the department is a traditional department with professional, proud individuals who are capable of doing the job. There are training, leadership, support programs in place, and these are strengths. And some of the other strengths are internally diminished by the need for tweaking and for improvements in the margins to minimize and reduce operational friction. Externally, the department lacks engagement with the community. We don't have the depth of positive relationships with our diverse community. That was a key theme in public engagement. Our more diverse communities and community members really have concerns about their police organization, and we have to develop those relationships, and we have to open ourselves up as a police organization to be highly engaged with those communities and those community members. CityGate stressed that the overarching need is to strengthen training and leadership at the lower ranks, combined with quality, data-driven internal public oversight. That's our systems approach. And again, what gets measured gets done. So we need to develop systems for the management of change. Next steps, we're reviewing the content, findings, recommendations of the report. The City Commission will be presented with incident response with set of performance goals. And then also we will be developing a sort of the deployment, the implementation plan. And this is what gets turned into the department's strategic plan. We are working on a process and a structure of leadership and engagement for the development of that plan. We're committed to not just doing that in a vacuum. It would be easy enough to do from a technical standpoint, but again, one of the key findings is community engagement, developing those systems and those processes that build trust and build community buy-in to our police department. And so as we develop the implementation plan, that's responsive to those 75 recommendations, we hope to do that with good feedback from the community, good participation from the community. And then when the new police chief is hired later this year, fall timeframe, we'd look to that leader, whoever's selected for that position, to provide their own insights and put their own kind of spin on the ball, their own fingerprints on the plan. We think that actually this plan will be very helpful in recruitment, because a police chief who's looking at the city of Lawrence as a potential employer and agency that they might be interested in leading, they'll be able to see, what's important, what's the work before them as a leader of this agency. And then another next step is just that CityGate acknowledged that there's a lot of work that is already ongoing or can be taken on as low-hanging fruit. We shouldn't wait for the next chief to come in before we get started on this report. On many of the findings in this report, there's a lot of good stuff that is already in the works, and that is low-hanging fruit enough to the point that we can go ahead and get started on it. So that's the end of my summary comments. Again, there is a lot to discuss. It's hard to do that just in even a 30-minute time frame. But any questions, I'll do my best to field. And I see Craig has been able to join us too. So between the two of us, we're open for Q&A. Yes, Shannon, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate the overview, and I really appreciate the conversations that have been happening kind of throughout the community since this report has come out. You wrapped up with a discussion around hiring of the new police chief, which I think is a really important piece for kind of the work of the overall CJCC. We've seen that we've recently had the interim police chief kind of step back and say that he wasn't interested in the role, and with the loss of Chief Burns, we've seen some turnover of Black police chiefs in particular. And I'm wondering, and this may kind of be focused at the city manager level, we saw from the report a disconnect between the police department and communities of color. We're also seeing a department that's really struggled with holding on to leaders of color. So what kind of internal and external work is happening with both recruitment and creating the kind of environment where we can retain leaders of color within the department?
Craig, you want to start?
Sure. Thanks for the question. We have engaged in a professional executive recruitment firm to help us on the search on a national basis, and obviously made improved diversity of our candidate pool a very high priority. We're not alone in that either, but we did emphasize it, and we'll expect that they do their work to do that. And Ralph Anderson Associates is who we were using, and they have a good had a very impressive ability to tap those markets and leadership throughout the country, we think, and we made that a high emphasis, and I think that will help us. While we haven't excluded any internal candidates at all, we haven't seen or expressed interest in that position. As far as internally, what are we working on in advance? There was a lot of anticipation for all of us in getting this top to bottom study done. And I think it does start to give us some working parameters about where we can work on that and improve our equity within the police department and show that how it represents our community as well. But we haven't really initiated too many innovations, both waiting for this study and also waiting for the new leadership, so we don't get too far advanced from them. So I would say that our work as an organization with the hiring of our equity and inclusion director here, and Dr. Muhammad's been able to kind of start to get to know the community through a very strange time to get to know a community. But we're very excited about the work that's embedded in our city's strategic plan about how we do that, and also the commitments we don't just make to the organization, but also to the community with our equity inclusion. So I'd say those are all wrapped in, but the specific initiatives haven't started yet, I would admit.
Marielle?
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation, by the way. I think it was good to hear it from CityGate at the City Commission meeting, but it's also good to get a smaller, more condensed version of it. There is a lot in that report. So my question is on the next steps, specifically with the strategic plan and implementation and its connection with the community. So do you have a time frame of when community members, community organizations specifically, would be able to look and engage in that strategic plan, and what type of feedback plan do you have? How involved are community members going? Do you envision community members being in this? Because I think that was a very big question and concern at the end of this, is that we see the recommendations, and we see things that we're aligning with a lot of the issues that community members, especially grassroots organizations, had with policing. And so I'm just interested to see if we're not necessarily waiting for the police chief to come in and start implementing a strategic plan, what is that going to look like if you have it?
Yeah. So this response is kind of like the last one that you know we are as an organization, and I know from the community perspective, I kind of acknowledge there's a focus on this one department, right? But Craig and I are looking at our whole organization, our whole city government organization, and so as an organization, we're committed to developing our capacity for public engagement and stakeholder engagement. We've actually had our first cohort of employees go through a 9-day training of a system, a methodology called IAP2, and it provides us with a couple dozen employees who are now very well trained to design public engagement processes. And so that's where we're at now, is the design of what that process would look like. So I don't have information about exactly what expectations you should have for public engagement, but I think that it will probably look different based on the type of recommendation. And so, with 75 different recommendations, not every one of those is probably going to get the same treatment in terms of public engagement. And so there'll probably be some that will really want to develop maybe independent, focused public engagement processes on just one or a handful of thematic recommendations, to do kind of a deep dive engagement with those things. There are others that are probably much more technical in nature, kind of simplistic. Maybe an example would be some of the work on our data management, and so there will be a spectrum of methods used, tools and techniques used, and we're working on developing kind of a project leadership team that will also be tasked with the community engagement piece of that. And then also, it's not just about the development of this plan, it's ongoing, long-term commitment to systems of community engagement, with the day-to-day operations, and then the big decisions, the big policies as well. Darren?
Actually, Sarah's hand was up before mine.
Oh, okay.
Ready to go
My screens keep bouncing around. Sorry, as people come and go. So, Sarah?
Thanks, Darren. I certainly don't mind waiting. Two things, and I know I've had some correspondence with Brandon through Tony Foster, our Director of Emergency Communications, but I think it's important to share with the CJCC that we're really trying to get the data set behind what CityGate used for its response time information, to verify that against what we have on the ECC side, to just verify those response times, because there are some things there that don't appear to quite match up in terms of that. So I guess one of the things I wanted to share with this group is that, we need to get that data set so that we can have that comparison and make sure that we're talking apples to apples in terms of response time and what we want to measure, and what parts of response are we looking at. And I just didn't know, Brandon, if you had any updates for this group as to when we might get that. And then I have a quick follow-up question.
Yeah, we're working on the data transfer now. They did their analysis in BI dashboards, and so we'll have access to that. And that's a great outcome from this study, is that we'll have some good kind of baseline analysis, and we can do our own replicating of that analysis, but good baseline analysis that we'll be able to use as we measure, or to measure improvement as we work on various recommendations. And Sarah, I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Well, my second part of the question is just, maybe to just sort of tag on to the conversation about community engagement with this plan and its implementation, is what do you specifically, or what does the city commission specifically see the role of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council in implementing some of, these findings, getting it, work groups, or setting that plan? You've got a great group of stakeholders in the criminal justice system on this call right now, and I think they'd love to know how they can be engaged in this work.
Yeah, great. That's a great question. And I think that there are already committees or teams. I forget what the term is that so like the CIT, right? That's a team that's already in place. We don't need to replicate that infrastructure. We just need to build on it, and this provides a little bit of focus for how we might do that. And so definitely some infrastructure in place with the CJCC that's going to be key, especially on those recommendations related to community partnerships. So we will, as we develop the project implementation team and our systems for engagement, stakeholders and public engagement, we'll be reaching out to this group for sure.
Thanks, Brandon. I just would offer, the assistance of Mike and, our staff to help create that crosswalk, of what existing work groups are and what existing teams are in place that, you guys might want just a little bit more information on to see how it might mesh up well with the findings in the report.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was one of the sidebar comments that the lead consultant made to me, was that Mike and then Bob Tryansky, both really get it, and they're systems thinkers. And so, I think we'll, we appreciate having access to them at the community level working on this plan. Darren?
Hey, Darren Kennedy. Since I've been real bad about identifying myself in previous meetings, I just want to reiterate, thank you, Brandon, for that overview. There are a couple of phrases that came up that I kind of was curious about how they were being used to help me really understand what is being suggested here. And there was discussion on multiple slides about it's a great traditional department, but also a discussion of it needing to be a community-based department. And I guess what I'm trying to figure out is what is meant by traditional? Is that its structure? Is that its governance? And then I think the bigger question I have is I'm trying to parse out, is this saying that a traditional department can be a community-based department, or is there a suggestion here that it's got to be overhauled, revised, rethought to be the community-based department that CityGate is recommending? Does that question make sense, what I'm asking?
Absolutely. And that is a really good question. And if I would have gone through the whole report, then I think it would make a lot more sense. And so I just want to encourage everybody to read through the full report and kind of formulate your own ideas about that. But the takeaway from that is they looked at, excuse me, just a moment, sorry. They did an assessment of the entire police department. And so, you look at the patrol unit, the investigations unit, the administrative unit, the leadership structure, the org chart. We have a pretty well-resourced police department, and they provide kind of traditional law enforcement services. We employ in a couple of different operations. We employ experts who are used by national agencies for training and development of best practices. It's a good police department. They provide good policing services, and so I think so that's what they mean by the traditional police department. And what they I think pretty quickly learned, especially with stakeholder and public engagement, is that our community wants our community has expectations for the police department that it seems like the police department is under the impression that they're already meeting, but they're not. And that's that goes to transparency, openness, engagement. Lawrence is a little bit different, a little bit unique from a lot of other communities, especially in the Midwest and especially in Kansas. I've learned many times that in Lawrence, you don't just say, I'm the expert, here's how it's going to be done, or here's how it should be done. We do things in a way that is much more engaging than that. And we darn well better have data to back up our recommendations as well. I think that's really what they're saying, is that we need to build on the bones that are in place, on the good framework that's in place of public safety services, but do that in a way that is hand in hand with our community, so our community has a level of trust, a level of buy-in, and that our policies reflect our community expectations, and then the practice of those policies actually reflect our community expectations. I don't know, Craig, do you want to offer any other thoughts on that? Because I think it is a really good, that's kind of the essence of the report.
That's Craig Owens. I was just about to say the same thing. I think that's one of the big fundamental takeaways is, this is our community's police department. And if we act like that and we listen like that, and then we reflect back in the way we do our work, that understanding, we'll be okay. I mean, that's the work we have ahead. And from what I've observed of this committee, that's exactly what you're doing. I mean, there's a very traditional element of the criminal justice system that we're continuing to try and improve. And I think this aligns with that. So I love Sarah's suggestion that we align with this work, because that's the same work that I perceive you are doing here. Is that, there is some really good work we'd like to do, and it's very complex work to make a modification to an extremely traditional system of criminal justice that exists, some of which we have no control over. And I think it probably aligns a lot with the work that you're doing here, is the work that we have ahead as a part of that same criminal justice system here in Lawrence. So I very much think that is the crux of the matter, and that is what we have a great opportunity to work with you and with the community to improve. I think that is the essence.
And then one last thought about, Darren, I think you were speaking to transformation, and I think some of those transformational items, what this report provides us is that, that acknowledgement that it's not just the police. We can't just tell the police to transform the way that they respond to somebody who's in mental health crisis. That requires us to really partner with our community partners and develop those community level systems.
That last piece seems really important, just as a me reflecting back, to use the terms we've been using.
Yeah. Chuck.
Thank you. This is really such an important discussion, and the report is really superb in so many ways. And so I want to thank and congratulate the city for carrying it out. This really is a potentially transformative moment in how we do things in policing and in this whole area. I was struck by one central message of the report, and I wonder if you could address it just a bit. They said at several different points, what gets measured gets done. And the sort of reverse implication is that what doesn't get measured too often doesn't get done, or doesn't get done very systematically. And I think of that as really, really important, that basic point, in light of what I think are the two sort of ongoing themes through the report. One is that there's a need for more focused attention to equity in enforcement and in responses to the community. And the second is a more focused attention to community engagement and listening and participation. And with regard to both of those things, you have talked about how you want to transform systems and institutions. And I think that's really, really important. And the police department is committed to that. I hope they're also committed to thinking creatively about how to measure progress and responsiveness on those two key kinds of things. And I say that because in part here, our efforts in the CJCC to address at least the first of those, equity, we've struggled to find adequate data, measurement on that question. And I think of that as one of the key challenges going ahead. And if it isn't adequately measured, I think it probably won't get the sustained, focused attention that it really needs. And so I do hope that in the institutional transformations that you're talking about, that key question of measurement, and down to the, all the way through the system, as you've been talking about it, down to the front lines, gets addressed, and also community responsiveness. So thank you. A comment, but also a comment that contains a question. Thanks.
Yeah, and Dr. Epp, that's a very good comment, very good observation. I will say it's not just up to the police department to do that. As an organization, the City of Lawrence is committed to that. I won't pull up our strategic plan scorecard, but some of those measures are embedded in our scorecard. And so we are, we're finding that historically, the city government in every department and as an organization as a whole lacks that data, lacks those systems of measurement and assessment. And so as an organization, we're developing our capacity there. And in terms of community engagement, we're doing the same. But I would say specifically to the police department, that is a department that, their traditional methods of community engagement are pretty traditional. It's, service on boards, nonprofit boards, coaching, visiting the school, doing outreach sort of I guess opportunities. And so we need to develop, not just as a city organization, but we really need to work with our police department to develop their capacity, their skill, and their ability to be able to be successful at community engagement. So that is something that is a challenge that's ahead of us.
Yeah, this is Craig Owens. I just to follow up on that. So he's right. We've got, I think, 130 data points on our primary measures on our performance indicators in our strategic plan. Maybe half of those we don't have baseline data. We know we're going to have to do it. We said this is how progress should be measured. This is what's important to what we said we want to do with our intent, but we don't have it. So we're going to have to start building it. And I know this group has struggled with that as well and is undertaking it. So, but we use the ETC group and survey. We're going to oversample so that we can tease out some of that data for smaller groups and interest groups and minority parts of our community, so that we can gain understanding that we can understand if we don't do the oversample. So that's one example. That's an important one because the perceptions of the community are a very important one. The actual outcomes and those data points are also important. And I think you all spend a lot of time on those outcome measures, and we're going to be very interested in that because we participate in those as well with the policing part. But Brandon is right. This is an undertaking for our entire organization and operation, and just establishing and saying this is what success looks like, and we're going to committed to measuring those is fundamental to what we've committed to in our strategic planning process. So it's hard work. And I've heard these conversations, and some of you are my data heroes because I'm sometimes seen as an expert, and I'm not compared to many of you, but we're very, very excited about the rigor of the data analysis that you're doing, and it'll inspire us to do work similarly.
Sarah.
Well, I feel like to capitalize on that, I think one of the first opportunities will be in August when we have Northeastern University back to begin talking about the STOP study. And so, maybe, Mike, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the timing of that. I don't want to move off the agenda too much, but I guess I want to think about it in context of how we can integrate pieces of the CityGate analysis in the work that's happening in other places. So, and I know they're coming in town in August to present, and Mike has a better understanding of what they're planning on doing in August.
Thanks, Sarah. This is Mike Brower. That's one of the things I did want to kind of hop on the agenda at the end is Northeastern is anxious to come in town and to meet with some folks face to face, to do some public engagement, but as well as do some preliminary discussions with the CJCC. And so they are planning to be on site for our scheduled August 10th meeting. And so we probably need to have some sort of discussion about people's comfort or level of comfort around doing a on-site or hybrid or face-to-face or hybrid meeting for that. But this discussion today, I was at 12:15, I'm supposed to summarize this discussion, and one of the things I want to make sure it's on the front burner is I think there's an opportunity for some discussion with Professor Epp, Brandon, myself, and then Jack and Janice from Northeastern prior to that visit, and Dr. Cravens, to be talking about this adequate data piece and to make sure that we're beginning some of those conversations. We are already having conversation with Northeastern about turning their data set into a data dashboard similar to what the Sheriff's Office has done. And so we'll be following up with the CJCC more around that as well, and our law enforcement partners. But so.
Any more questions? Craig and Brandon, thanks so much for the summary, and appreciate you answering all of our questions. I think Mike's going to talk to us about a CJCC retreat.
Yes, I raised my hand, Pam. I had a question. So this is Mike. Before you go, Brandon and Craig. So I'm currently attending the National Co-Responder Conference in Olathe this week, and which, by the way, you guys missed it. It has been phenomenal. I mean, it's really been good. Commissioner Shannon Reed is there, along with Monica and Stacey from our co-responder work group, Aaron Newton from Burton Ash, and Bob Transky is actually currently doing a presentation at the conference. So he's not able to join us today. But that brings up part of our conversation that we've had this little small Douglas County group during lunch yesterday and this morning is just, curious as Craig or Brandon, I know Chief Heffley couldn't be here today because of a family emergency, but where do you see our co-responder program at, and maybe you can't answer this, but the prioritization of that and the vision for that moving into the future. Even if you can't answer that question, I want to get that out on the table as something there's great interest in on our end. So,
Craig Owens, well, that's the season, isn't it? Everybody wants to know what's going to be in the city manager's recommended budget. We're working very hard to try and figure all those things out, but I think it's fair to say we agree. It was nice to see outside evaluators talk about how great the thought process is in the thinking and the work that's been going on for a while on things like the co-responder program, things that involve mental health, and so they acknowledge that there's some great work going on here. I think my understanding from them was they just said, you just got to fund it all. I mean, it's just not getting enough. You're in order to meet the expectations of the community, you're going to need to find a way to take it to scale a lot more. That was my takeaway from the conversation. Brandon, you can disagree with me, but I think they'd acknowledged it's fundamentally it's going in such a great direction. We just don't take it to scale to meet what our community and most communities around the country are asking for and needing. So I think it's in our future. I'm excited that we already have a head start on these important programs, but it's like a lot of things, the appetites are very rich to do a lot of things well in this community, and we just don't have enough to go around on everything. So that's what I'm wrestling with for the next month, to get that budget turned out. But I think conceptually it's in our future, and I think everybody is seeing green lights to trying to figure out how do we take that to better scale.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what the feedback from the consultant is that you can't just tell the police not to respond when they're called to respond. We need you can't have a co-responder team or an alternative response team without good flight control or dispatch. Then you have to have the embedded team with 24/7 365 capacity to be able to respond. And then when they respond, they have to have some place to take people to care for them if they need to take them. And we have to have the ability to help people stabilize. And then we need prevention capacity to be able to keep people from having reoccurring cases too often. And so it's a systems based approach, and I think that's what this group has envisioned. And so it's about prioritizing investment to be able to accomplish that.
This is Mike, and thanks for that, Craig and Brandon. That's super exciting to us who've been working on this for a few years. And I definitely understand the budget struggles as just being more closely associated with Sarah Plinsky this year, trying to go through budget. And I'll put this in place. I know Chief Patrick couldn't be here today, but Chief Lovett has been an advocate for this, and so is Sheriff Armbruster. Is how do we then even expand that to the entire county and serve all of our communities? So one of many priorities, but we'll continue to pay attention to, though. I think from a CJCC standpoint, there could be some opportunities for us to look at some pursuing some grants. Who's the gatekeeper of those grants? We would be something to be worked out, but we have the expertise to put together quality applications and helping us continue to build on this. So in the way of summary, I did want to, I'll make sure I do some follow-up. Chuck, I'll do a phone call that you and Dr. Cravens and I can get together, and maybe include Brandon and maybe do it with Jack and Janice from Northeastern here before August, and see if we can start talking about data, especially moving forward after the contact study. We're waiting for a final contract to extend it through the end of the year, but we want to have conversations now about how do we continue to gather this data well beyond when Northeastern leaves us to ourselves. And then I did, we talked about the role of the CJCC. I think Sarah brought that up, and that was one of my questions as well. Is I see us as here to support and help our partners, which certainly the city and the Lawrence Police Department are our partners. I think there's just more information needs to be gone through, and more discussions have to be had before there's specific asks there yet. But I did want the council to know that, Lawrence PD is on the CIT council, is on the Stepping Up Initiative Council or work group, and is on the one of the other work groups. We have city members that are on, basically 5 of our 6 work groups. We have city law enforcement or city staff on those work groups, all except for the evaluation work group, which is focusing on alternative incarceration initiatives paid for by the county commission. So, and so we'll make sure that we get this study out to our work group members, and I think there's portions of it that should be brought up in the work groups so that they can generate ideas and emphasize the priority of the city in some of this work. So so more information to come, I guess. So, and I was seeing do we have a hand raised?
That's me. This is
Yeah.
Commissioner Nanda. Thanks. I kind of wanted to jump back to your first question around, where is the city on funding this, and thinking about like the role that we've been talking about with the CJCC and how we're not a recommendation body, but this requires, 5 different organizations all lifting at the same time to make this successful. And knowing what this looks like financially and how we could divvy that up and reach an agreement, how we can make sure that the end game is, that these folks are receiving what they need on that back end as well. How do we all do that? How do we all do that lift at the same time? How does that impact the strategic plan of the city, where the county wants to go, and how we move that all forward? I think if we are successful in doing this, if we can see some numbers and understand what that looks like as a group, and then have those elected folks take that back, have our city and county administrators and managers take that back, and we're all moving forward at the same place. If we pull this off, that will be such a precedent for further action on doing this work. And I'm really excited on how we can all move forward on this, because I haven't heard any lack of buy-in or lack of interest in doing this. It's just a matter of how, and that's pretty awesome.
This is Mike. Thanks, Commissioner. That we like hearing that from people who control budgets. And that's kind of the purpose of the council, I think, is this kind of a project. So I did want to bring up I some conversations with several of you over the last month or two. I think we have new members on the council. We've done a lot of work, especially from a data perspective, on some of our strategic goals. And I really think here early fall would be an excellent time for us to do a council retreat, to take a look at 2 things specifically. One is our strategic goals. And I think some of those, it's time for some either clarification or action steps around those goals to be more specific. I think we've grown in our work together that it's time for that. We also have some new perspectives. So I'm interested to see if our current strategic goals meet the needs of the community, as Craig and Brandon were talking about earlier. And then just a conversation about I'm curious as your feedback on how the work groups are working. Are they achieving the goals that we want? And do we have the right work groups in place? So I think there's some organizational work that especially Matt and I can do before we have a retreat, that we can make it a very efficient use of your time. And so the idea is either we bring everybody together for box lunches, we take an afternoon and we complete the retreat, or even we could do a late afternoon, box lunches for dinner, early evening. But I think like a 4.5 hour block, we could achieve this. I hate that I'm always asking you guys for Saturdays to do these kinds of things. Although I'm available, so I have no kids playing sports. So, but I'm just curious as to feedback from you on the interest in doing a retreat in September, and what kind of schedule might be most beneficial to those of you. Is silence consent? Schedule whenever I want.
Shannon's got her hand up.
Oh, sorry, yes, Shannon.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I am a big fan of organizing a retreat because, for all the reasons that you mentioned, Mike, I think that we have particularly some new community members on our board, and it's really important to hear those perspectives and make sure that we're moving forward. I liked the listening session that we had around one of our work groups, but I think it's also important to hear updates from the work of our work groups. Does the organization of our current work groups make sense for moving forward? So I really appreciate the time piece, and I will make my schedule work for whatever works best for particularly the community members who are so generous with their time with us.
Yes, Sarah?
I guess with that, I guess I would just also agree and defer to maybe Darren and Marielle and Tamara in terms of which would you prefer? The rest of us all get paid to be here, with the perception of maybe Professor F. So.
Darren?
Darren Kennedy again. Yeah, I mean, I'm a believer, sorry for being repetitive. I think a retreat is absolutely necessary. I think it's time to check in for all the reasons that you raised, Mike. I mean, in terms of, yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, if we're talking September's a little bit wacky, but this is an important community engagement. So yeah, count me in. Saturday's probably going to be easier than during the week, sorry. Because I know, again, this is all your jobs. So apologies for that being the best possible day. But yes, I absolutely support a retreat.
Dr. Epp?
Sorry, did you call on me?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, Chuck Epp. Yes, I would support this as well.
And so, Chuck, is there a particular time schedule that would work best for you if I do a doodle poll? And same question for Marielle. And Tamara is on the phone, so she's texting me. So she's thumbs up on a retreat in September, but timing wise, if I send out a doodle poll, I'm just curious as what might work best for your work schedules.
Yeah, Saturdays are, oh, this is Marielle, sorry. Saturdays are fine because I do work. So I can make it work. That's enough time in advance. I don't know what happens in September right now. So yeah, that's cool.
Tamara says send her a doodle poll. And Chuck, and any time schedule preference for you, or?
Saturdays will be fine. I'd have to look at my calendar with a doodle poll in front of me though.
Okay. So just to everyone, it sounds to me like, especially talking to community members, that Saturdays are just going to be better. I certainly would hate the thought of someone taking vacation time to do a retreat with us. So there's better use of your vacation time. Although I appreciate your willingness. So I'm going to send a doodle poll, and I will probably do Saturdays from the week after Labor Day through into October to give you some selection. But the sooner you complete that, the sooner everyone, I'll send it out today, but I can, they get something scheduled and people can manage their schedules accordingly. So the Pam, that's all I had on that.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. This is our opportunity for public comment. If anybody in the public wants to raise their hand.
Yeah, Pam, I have Rick Kagan, so
Okay.
I'm going to promote him to panelist.
Rick, do you want to ask your question?
So I promoted him. There he comes. Okay, took a second.
Yeah, thank you. I see you have some things on the agenda about some of the other work groups, and I was kind of holding my thought until those updates, if you're covering them, but I was curious about the, how to get a list of the members of some of the other work groups like incarceration alternatives. Looks like there's 2 of them in the mobile response group and stepping up. Just to get an idea of who's already involved in those besides the members of this council.
This is Mike. I can take that, Rick. The work group description of each work group and the list of members is on the CJCC hub site, and I'll be happy to send you a link to that.
Oh, I've got that. Thank you. I'll go with you. Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we just updated it like last month, so it should be pretty current.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Rick. Anyone else from the community? I don't see any Pam.
Okay, do we have anything else for the good of the order today? No. Then I'll call this meeting adjourned. The next CJCC meeting will be August the 10th. There is no meeting in July. We'll see everyone then. Thank you for coming today.